I've been putting this off for a long time, but I think it's about time I start sharing my story in a bit more of a long form format like YouTube. I'm going to walk you through today the steps in my kind of origin story of where I started. When it comes to fitness, my story started in football, right? Just like any other young lad did, I was obsessed. As a young kid, I would kick a ball against the wall in my back garden, from first thing in the morning to when I got back from school until it got late at night, and it honestly drove mum and dad mad. Initially, this started as a passion, but then as the years went through, I started to play at a higher level, went to different football academies as a young kid, and this is what truly ignited my passion for health, fitness at a very, very early age. It got to a point where I was like 14, 15, and I was on the brink of, breaking into, higher level academies in the championship, which was amazing at the time. But at that point, when I was released at, 16 years old, everything felt like it was crashing down. Just like any other kid's dream was, that you think you're going to be a pro footballer and it's all this, but it really did hit me hard at such a young age. That was all my identity was wrapped around, was football. Now, luckily after that moment, obviously I was crushed. I did go and play full-time football at 16, 17, only in the conference at the time, which was a great experience. I went to study BTEC Sports Science and Nutrition at the college that was local to me as well. And through that period of time, I slowly drifted away from football. Being told you're not big enough, you're not strong enough, you're ever going to be good enough at 16, it kind of was ringing in my head for those 2-year period. So for that 2 years, that's when I first fell in love with the gym. So I started going to the gym at maybe 15, 16, occasionally. And then as the time went through, this became my passion. And it got to a point where I became more obsessed about strength and conditioning and nutrition, and actually wanted to get bigger at 17 years old, finally starting to see results. That football started to slowly dwindle away, and that's where I went really all in on the gym. The gym became my passion. I would literally finish football, head straight to the gym, then I'd go out partying on the weekends. That was my lifestyle at 18 years old. And then it got to a point where I really had no idea what to do with my life. Football was no longer a thing. I was refereeing at the time for part-time money on the weekends, working for my dad's fabric shop at the time, earning minimum wage. And I felt honestly a bit lost. At 18 years old, I had no idea where to turn, where to go to. And I went down the obvious route. I went to university, I went to study sport and exercise science at the time. It was the one thing that I was passionate about and interested in. And I originally thought I wanted to go and be a strength and conditioning coach. So I went to uni, I had an amazing time, and honestly, I partied non-stop, right? Barely even went to the gym, if I'm honest. For the first 3 months of uni, I partied every week, 3-4 times a week, getting up at 11 a.m., going to bed at 3 or 4. And at the start, this felt like I was completely free. I had no responsibilities, no passion. But then suddenly it appeared that this dark cloud was coming over me. I think it was like November, December time. I was probably 10, 12 kilos, 85 kilos when, to be honest, at football, I was probably like 72, 73 kilo. I'd put on a lot of body fat. I was in the worst shape of my life. And, honestly, I felt like a little bit depressed and down, having come from like a high performance sporting environment to then going into a party and having no control of my routine, not really going into even to university. I felt very unfulfilled. And I'd always been a person when at a younger age where I was very driven. I was working part-time jobs at 15, 16 to want to do well. I was selling sweets at school as a kid. I was always that person that wanted to achieve, wanted to do well. And I just got to a point where I was just so unfulfilled. And that's when I decided, I need to make a change. I can't carry on down this path of just constant drinking. I was sat in my overdraft, £500 in debt, at 18, 19 years old, which was not a nice thought. So that's when I originally started looking for a part-time job. I would hand my flyer out. I was already PT certified and I'd done a bit of gym instructor work back in the local gym back home just on the side. And I started handing my CV into every single gym in Liverpool, where I was going to university, handing my CV out. I didn't hear back from anyone, and within 2 weeks later, I'd about given up, and I got a phone call, from my future employer. And they called me up and they said, look, we're hiring for personal trainers. We're a body transformation facility. I was like, to be honest, I'm just looking for a part-time job to get by at uni, and said, to be honest, mate, we're not going to be interested. I thought about that for a few moments and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. So I went for an interview at this gym called Absolute Body Solutions in Liverpool. And this was a real big turning point in my journey for me. So I went into the interview, I was massive on AMP, anatomy and physiology. I was big into, bodybuilding training at the time, and I was very passionate about that. So I excelled in the interview, and they said, right, we're going to take you through to the practical interview. At the time, I didn't know what this was. They were going to train me to, the extreme. So I went into the gym at the time, and he says, right, we're going to put you through a session. We're going to put you through something called the DEF circuit. And what this is it's 4 exercises. You've got a trap bar deadlift, you've got a overhead press, shoulder press, pull-ups, and then you're going into a squat, all for 10 to 12 reps, literally with no rest in between. There's a massive giant set. And the whole goal and whole purpose of this gym was to see how hard I could train. They literally, all they would do is they would increase the weight each set, and they would try and get you to a point where you could not physically exert yourself anymore. I actually ended up being sick on the 4th or 5th giant set. And they said, look, like, this is part of the process. At the time, I thought, you know what, they're just trying to kill me. They're just trying to, completely embarrass me and take me to a place I've never been before. But all they were doing at that time, they tested my resilience and strength of whether I had what it takes to become a personal trainer and operate at a high level. And the next day, I actually got offered the job. And I was excited. It was a full-time job where they said I'd be doing 30 personal training sessions a week, earning more money than I'd ever earned before, in any previous job, and that really excited me. So I actually went out celebrating that next week, and this is actually a funny story, because this was literally a point in my life that I completely regretted, because I actually got asked to go on a student night out that I'd been going on every night, and it was a Wednesday night, and I had my first PT client induction on that Thursday morning. My mate said to me, just come for a few drinks. And I did go for a few drinks. I did have probably 6-7 drinks at the time. But the morning after, I overslept my alarm. My boss is ringing me at 8 a.m. in the morning saying, if you don't get down here now, you're gone. So the gym was 3 minutes run away from my house. So I ran down to the gym as fast as I could. I was already late. I could see him as I walked into the gym, the furiosity on his face. He was already training my PT client at the time, and he just handed me over the session. He says, I'll speak to you after. So I did the personal training session, probably still stinking of booze, if I'm honest. Really didn't make a good impression. And he sat me down in the office, and I had the biggest talking to ever, like really aggressively at the time. And he said to me, like, look, we need to decide whether you're actually going to make it. I need to have a think about this, whether I actually want to take you through the next steps. And it was that period of time that I had just instant regret. And luckily for the manager, Ali Fraser, if you eventually watch this video, he saved my job at the time. He said, look, I can see potential in this kid. Yes, he's a drunken student, but I know where he could be. And that was the moment that I decided I was going to make a change. I was going to stop going out, stop socializing, drinking, and I wanted to make something of myself, because I knew I had potential in this. It was a massive passion of mine. And from that moment forward was the catalyst in my personal training career. It honestly led me down to excel, within personal training. I was the fastest promoted personal trainer to their tier 3 status in about a year and a half of working for the company. I was working with the highest end corporate clients, delivering 35, sometimes 45 personal training sessions a week. And I was loving it. At this point, I'd found my true passion. I'd found something that I was genuinely good at, I enjoyed, that didn't feel like work. And it completely transformed the way I looked at, my personal development and progression. I was teaching other coaches like how to, improve client adherence, improve nutritional programming, improving biomechanics and execution, having come from, mentored from this company to a really high level. This time at the company was like probably the most exciting time of my career, given I wasn't earning a huge amount of money at the time, barely minimum wage, if I'm honest. But these were the most pivotal moments in my career, working for 3.5-4 years on the gym floor for a high performance company, giving me and providing me clients, and all I had to do was coach. So I didn't have to think about marketing, I didn't have to think about sales. All I could focus on at this period of time was becoming the best coach I could be for my clients. And I did this probably for 3.5-4 years, right up until COVID. I just loved every single step of it. Through those 3 or 4 years, I would go to courses like working with, Phil Lerney, Mark Coles, doing physique camps, and just honing in my craft of body transformations. And that's what I truly fell in love with at the time. And I absolutely loved it. But it came to a point where I was finishing university, and this is where everything locked down. I went from having, honestly at the time, probably 55 personal training sessions a week alongside a full-time degree. And luckily I smashed my exams and managed to pass first class in the end, which was incredible. But it came to a turning point in my career where I had to decide what I wanted to do. Was I going to pursue the sports science career? At the time I was interning for Tranmere Rovers. At the time they'd gone through multiple promotions into League One, and I was the S&C coach for their under-18s. I loved that side, but I also knew there wasn't that big of a future in that. But where was I going to go down my personal training? So I made a decision probably in March, just as the gyms were locking down, that I wanted to commit to being a personal trainer long term, and I wanted to make this my passion. But when everything got stripped away from me in lockdown, I didn't know what was happening. 4 weeks went by, 6 weeks went by, I couldn't train my clients. I was literally sitting at home doing nothing. My income had gone from like a decent salary down to literally zero, being self-employed, moved back home with my parents. And I dwelled on this for many, many weeks, finished my dissertation, finished my degree. And it got to a point where I didn't really know what the next steps were. I'd seen a few coaches go and work to be self-employed, earning way more money than what I was, working with higher level clients, having more control of their time, not having to do 55 sessions a week to make a decent living. And at that time, I'd been thinking about it, and I spoke to my parents about it at the time. I was like, I'm thinking about making the jump. But for this time, I was filled with so much self-doubt of what if it fails? What if it doesn't work out? But Mum says, you've just got to give this one shot. What's the worst thing that could happen? And her words really rung in my head. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to do this. And that's where I started building my online business during lockdown. And all I did to start with was I coached all of my friends and family through a transformation. I coached my brother, my best friend. I did a photo shoot transformation in that summer whilst the gyms were still locked down, training at home. I documented my process on social media, showing my progress photos week to week, what I was doing with my training, what I was doing with my nutrition. And through this kind of growth on social media, I started to get a lot of people asking me questions around, could you do this for me? Could you help me out? And that's what slowly evolved. Like, I'd never really intended on, becoming an online coach. Back then in 2020, it wasn't really a thing. You become a personal trainer and climb the ranks. But I just started selling programs. And at the time, they were just Word documents, 50, 60 pounds a month online coaching. By the end of summer, maybe a maximum of 80 pounds per client. But because of that social proof that I generated through those 3, 4, 5 month period of literally transforming, 20, 30 people in my local town, my name had really started to spread. By the end of summer, probably around, let's say August, September time, I was in a position where I was coaching 50, 60 people online, who already generated a full-time job from going through this process. And that's where I thought, this could be something truly special. And I started mapping out my goals of where I wanted to be. And I questioned whether I actually needed to go back to one-to-one personal training at the time, because I built up an amazing client base of very high-paying premium clients in Liverpool, and that's where I had my reputation as a personal trainer. So I went back, but this time I didn't go back working for the company. I went back self-employed. And this was incredible. I went back self-employed. I'd rented a space in a gym for a few £100s a month. And I couldn't believe it. All my clients who had been working with me, inquired and wanted to come back. And that's what I did. I started doing PT gym floors alongside the online. And I'll be honest, for about 6 months, this absolutely killed me. I was doing 35 personal training sessions on the gym floor, morning and evening. And then during the daytimes, I'd train and then just about have time for training, but I'd do my online clients. And this carried on for about 6 months to a point where I was fully booked online, but I was fully booked one-to-one. I was burning myself out every day at 21 years old, earning an incredible living that I never even thought was possible, and achieving results with clients that I'd never achieved once before, and the name continued to grow. And the second lockdown actually saved me. Now, I know a lot of people have a negative conception of what happened during that time, but this was a pivotal moment in my career because it forced me to pivot. When that second lockdown hit, that's when I knew I was ready to make the jump. I was working with a lot of people online, achieving incredible transformations, and that's where I made the jump to be a full-time online coach in probably the start of 2021. And that's mentor at the time, back then, Mark Coles. And Mark challenged me to think bigger. At the time I was working with a lot of clients. I was pretty stretched, but I knew there was more in the tank because I had more inquiries at the time than I knew what to deal with. I was becoming honestly quite overwhelmed. I'd invested more money than I used to earn in about 6 months into this mentorship, so it scared the life out of me. But that time with him, when I was working with him, he stretched me to think bigger about a vision about where I wanted to have and ultimately the impact I wanted to create on the fitness industry, not just from a results standpoint, but potentially employing other coaches to work for me. At the time, I never even thought that would be even possible. I'd see what he was doing with his gym. I'd looked at other successful coaches on the gym floor and I'd see the teams that they'd built, and it did inspire me. But at this time, I was a 21-year-old kid. I had no real business experience whatsoever, and I was in decent shape, but I didn't have the physique to command respect as other online successful coaches in the space. At that time, I probably had more clients, more inquiries than what they had, so I felt like honestly quite a bit of an imposter. And this is something that I dealt with for quite some time, as I'd achieved massive success at such a young age, but I didn't feel worthy of success. I felt like I didn't earn it. And that's something that I had to overcome. I had to overcome this mental challenge of, feeling worthy of what if this all goes down the pan and I fail? What if this all is too good to be true and I'm just gonna completely fall back into, being a personal trainer on the gym floor, working for someone else? And I dealt with that for quite some time. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to commit and I'm going to go all in. And this is where, in those six months, I hired my first coach at the time. started to give him clients, educated him from a leadership perspective about how to coach, how to educate Billy at the time, who's still working with me to this day, about how we could create more impact for people. And over those 6 months periods of when I was living in the UK, I'd meet up with clients every Friday in the gym floor, do photo shoots with them, every Friday, take them out for a Nando's after, celebrate their success. And through this time, not running a paid ad, not sending a DM, anything like that, I would literally just have many people coming to me every week asking to do 16-week transformations, 6-month transformations, getting in the best shape of their life. Because in my local town, no one was really doing this at the time. And it really grew, more than I ever expected. And it came to a point where, I was thinking about my next step. I was living at home with my parents. I didn't really know where to go. I didn't really want to go back to Liverpool. Been there for 4 years. I've moved back to the middle of England. I live on a farm back in the UK. There's not really much going on. There's a local gym. There's a few shops and cafes, but I knew there was probably more for me out there. So I started considering my options. And it wasn't until a day where my friend called me up, Jack at the time, who's a mindset coach. He said, mate, I'm going to be moving to Dubai in September for 3 months. This is probably about July time. He said to me, do you want to come just to try it out for 3 months? And I was like, do you know what? Yeah, I will. It didn't even pop into my mind a thought of saying, maybe not, or what if it doesn't work out? I just thought, why not? If I go over, I love it. If I don't, I can just stay in the UK. And that was incredible. I had the call with him in July. We got together, we booked an apartment in Dubai Marina. I think I was 21, maybe turning 22 at the time. And that was a big step for me. Obviously I haven't moved out since I was 18, it was good, but living in another country scared the life out of me when the time came to it. But I went all in on it. At the time, Dubai was the massive fitness hotspot. All the best online coaches in the UK had moved over. Your big fitness influencers were out here, like Mike Thurston was a big inspiration for me back in the day. I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna embrace it. I'm gonna network as much as possible when I got over here. And I fell in love with the place. Since I got over here, I fell in love with the convenience, the routine, the gyms, the weather, the networking that I was able to expose myself to. I'd never really been in a big network of people so driven, so ambitious. Everyone was in amazing shape. And I just took this as inspiration. Never once did I compare myself. I was a 22-year-old kid, so small in comparison to the others. But I found that as deeply inspired. I saw where other coaches were and I knew where I wanted to get to. I had a vision in my mind. And I executed that vision relentlessly for 12 months. I didn't go out, I didn't socialize when I got to Dubai. Maybe a little bit from time to time. There was a time where maybe I did have a few drinks, towards Christmas, but when January came, I went all in on a bodybuilding prep, and this was a pivotal part. I competed in men's physique, and I literally dedicated 6 months of my life to my physique and my business and nothing else. And that was a massive driving force for me because it removed any other distraction. That's where my business really scaled. I added another coach. I ran 2 team photo shoots. I competed on stage and came 3rd in the UK DFBA. And that was incredible. I'd experienced more growth physically in terms of my physique, mentally in terms of my discipline, my mindset. I realized when I commit myself to a cause what was truly possible. And from that, being so dialed in with my routine, my business grew exponentially. And this has continued, over the past few years since moving over to Dubai. I've managed to maintain this level of discipline, routine, standards. My network has expanded and grown. I've been in Dubai for 4.5 years now, and it's truly a place I can call home. Not just obviously, with the environment, but I've got some of my best friends here. I've been surrounded by people that have challenged me to think bigger. I think a lot of time in the UK, I was surrounded by people that maybe didn't align with what I wanted to do, the values that I have, how I like to spend my time. Coming out here has really opened up my eyes and opportunities and really expanded my thinking to think bigger. And that's what I love about this place is, I think it gets a bit of a bad rap time sometimes on social media, for, the flashiness or, it's a bit in your face and there's Lamborghinis and, all this expensive stuff. But when you strip it all back and you take it for what it is, it's just growth encapsulated into a city that just challenge you to think bigger. And it is very much sink or swim out here. If anyone's watching this now, thinking about coming to Dubai, it is sink or swim. You have to graft. It is a place that you have to work or you will get left behind. And some people fall to that pressure. Maybe they go out on the weekends, they drink excessively, buying bottles, but other people excel and thrive. And if you're one of those people that put yourself in a position where you can thrive, this is a place that I would honestly seriously consider. And just where we're up to today, really, the business has expanded massively. I've became, a leading transformation coach within the UK space. I've built a team of 5 coaches now that work for me full time, managing a team of 10 staff. My physique has continually grown and got bigger and better as the years have gone on. And I put it all down to personal growth and development. Like, if you're someone who doesn't settle for being average, you don't want to fit into the status quo, and you're not ready to accept mediocre standards, challenge yourself to think bigger. I've never accepted being where I was at any stage of my career, and I don't think I ever will. I think what makes me truly happy and gives me the fulfillment is growth, it is progress. And that's what I want for all my clients too that I coach now. It's not just about six-pack abs, it's about becoming the next best version of yourself. Challenge yourself to get in incredible shape, absolutely excel in your career or your finances, build incredible relationships with people that mean a lot to you. Transform your mindset to think bigger and better. And that's something that I'm big on within my coaching brand and kind of what we do. We coach men from the ages of young 20s all the way up to kind of 45. They're all on the same mission to make each other better. Surround yourself in a community and network of people to strive and be better. And that's what Fortis Transformations is about. Originally it was just JJ Transformations when it was just me, but as we've grown and expanded, we've built a team and a culture which drives off excellence and drives off progress. And that's what my vision now is. I've been coaching now coming up maybe 9 years. I've never once accepted average results. I want people to think bigger. And that's what my vision is now, is to make mass impact. I'm only 26 years old, and I know I have so much more to give within this fitness industry to create massive impact on other people's lives. I want to create the UK's leading body transformation company, not just in terms of physique, but from a mindset element as well. Using the physical as the vehicle, as the transformation of change in every area of your life. And I truly think that there is so much more impact that we can have as personal trainers in this industry. But I want to raise the standards across the board in everything that we do as a team, for other coaches, to truly make massive impact. Because ever since I started this business, it's never once been about how much money can we make, how much revenue can we have. It's always been about the people in front of me. The events that we run, the team photo shoots, seeing someone's face light up when they've seen a transformation photo of where they started to where they are now, and them not even realizing what was possible when they came into the program. To the coaches that I mentor now, and seeing them grow in their careers to become better coaches, to create more impact and live a life that they once thought was never possible as well. And that's what my vision is. It's just to help people reach their true potential. I believe that I was put on this earth to help others, and I truly believe that. And that's all I want to do now, is I want to use this channel to inspire, to educate, to get people to think bigger. Obviously I'll take you through my journey, my day-to-day, my training, my routine, but I want you to give you insight into how I run my brand, how I operate as a business owner, how I lead a team of 10 members of staff. I hope you take massive, not just inspiration, but education and value from this as well. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing within this space.